3 words to share, 3 words to accept my invitation to consider, and 3 words that I think become more and more important as AI continues to fall upon humanity. And I'm writing a book called The Fall of AI, where you'll find out a bit more about why I'm calling it a fall rather than a rise of AI. But that's for another time. Let me say the 3 words. They'll sound very jargonistic. I think they've become very crucial. They're quite philosophical in their undertones, but very practical in terms of when we consider the consequences of the fall of AI. One is transhumanism, one is hyperhumanism, and one is hypohumanism. And it's just an invitation for you to reflect on these and to inquire a bit further. And in a very, very short video, I'm obviously going to simplify what these words might mean, but hopefully you can see where they contrast quite significantly and potentially where they can become resolved and they overlap. Transhumanism in many ways takes the assumption that the human being is not only incomplete but is a problem to solve and potentially a problem to transcend, and the transcendence will be through AI. AI may well solve the problem of humanity. The problem is that we are weak, that we are limited, that we are mortal, that we have very ineffective and inefficient memories that tend to go wrong at some point during our life, that our physical bodies lack the functionality that society might need in the future, that we are simply not super men and women and people, that we fall short, we are a problem to solve, and the transcendence of humanity using artificial intelligence and automation at one level will implant us with superpowers, will resolve the problems of weakness that we have, the lack of strength that we've got, the fact that we get old, the fact that we often malfunction, and that AI can solve that, can prevent it, but also can enhance it in different ways, and at some point might render some of our human weaknesses irrelevant as AI takes over from us, substitutes what we do with artificial intelligence. And the positive view of that, of course, is that by transcending humanity, we end up with human beings that are more idle in some ways, or doing more exciting, interesting things. So AI will finally solve the problem of work where we will no longer need to work. It will solve the problem of us making ineffective, inefficient, limited decisions by taking decisions for us. It might solve climate change by preventing us causing the harm in the first place. And there are various science fiction scenarios where it wipes us out, it weakens us, or what it simply does is a kind of guardian or parent that fills the gaps of the lack that is human beings. So transhumanism is almost the inevitability and maybe even the moral duty of those creating AI to address the weaknesses that are limited, flesh-based, mortal human beings. The positive view of that is that's great. It gives us a step forward in our evolution, that technology gives us a leg up, gives us a faster track to perfection, or at least improvement. Hyperhumanism doesn't take that starting point at all. It takes the starting point of the sacredness of the human condition. It looks at the earth. It looks at the idea that we have an anthropocentric earth that gives us duties to look after nature, to look after ourselves, to look after the animal kingdom, to uplift ourselves. But ourselves are really important. They are not there to be transcended by artificial intelligence. And actually transhumanists such as Carl Hayden-Smith, you can look him up, he's an academic, talk about how the human in a place of sacred mastery can uplift ourselves through everything from personal development, spiritual practices. Some people have tried to take natural substances and chemicals, and other people are using technology to augment themselves, but the decision and the sacredness about Hyperhumanism is that we can uplift humanity, perhaps through technology, without losing our human freedom. We're not in a problematic state, we're in an opportunistic state of humans being able to perhaps use technology to improve and evolve perhaps faster and more effectively, but because we choose to. And so hyperhumanism takes its central point of the value of the human being. That's not to be questioned. Humanity is not a problem to solve, but an opportunity to develop. And so there's an ideological difference between transhumanism, because it doesn't take its starting point in a way with a potential distaste or disgust for human weakness, but it sees us as in a healthy process of evolution, and that we've got to a stage in our evolution where our improvement can become kind of hyper change quickly. A lot of people attracted to that don't take as the starting point that human beings are problematic, a fundamental place. Hypohumanism, which you may not have heard of, and certainly I've met hyperhumanists and transhumanists who have no idea what the word means, is definitely niche, it's definitely quite small, but I think philosophically it sits alongside those other two. And hypohumanism, in some ways it's quite idealistic, because what it does, it idealizes, isn't the slightly Nietzschean, that's named after Nietzsche, view of humans as kind of ascending in some way, perhaps through competition, perhaps through other means, ascending to the condition of superhuman, but actually that the purpose of existence, as evidenced by your life and how you experience it on your own with your family and your communities, is that we often learn best when we make mistakes, that we are vulnerable, and that vulnerability is beautiful in the right context, morally at least, where we can still respect each other, that actually human beings, sometimes it benefits us to diminish, and it could be that a part of our clear process in life, if we accept it and find it beautiful, is that we are born, we grow old, and we die. We absolutely diminish until we become dust to dust. And some people at least are happy with that story, and to pass on their immortality if they choose to, not through trying to live forever biologically, but by having stories to leave behind, having a legacy to leave behind of the good impact they might have had on the earth. Hypohumanism definitely allows the idea that the purpose of us is to disappear. The purpose of human beings is to, perhaps we begin in a state of divine perfection, and it's not to deliberately go downhill, but it is certainly based on an ideology that often less is more, that we have. This is how AI, generative AI has worked. By the time we're even children, we've got trillions of bits of data and memory in our head, and we know we're heading towards older age. And the purpose might be to cast things off. The purpose of life might be to let go of things, is to simplify our lives, is not to augment our lives or transcend with tech that somehow enables us to do more, but the purpose of life is to get back to the essentials. Now that's problematic for a lot of people, but I quite like it in contrast to the other two. Certainly if you declutter, certainly if you choose to forget stuff, you throw things away, you try to, certainly through things like mindful practices, is to let go of memories sometimes and just come back to the core and the essential. That's simply doing nothing. What was it that Ratty says in The Wind in the Willows? There's something not quite so much fun as simply messing around in boats. So if you're frowning at this, that's fine. But certainly it becomes a viable approach too, that the purpose of artificial intelligence isn't to augment us at all. It might be, if it's got anything to do, is it might help us to simplify, to cast off, to become less clever and perhaps a bit more wise, to have simplicity in our lives, and to come down to a point almost where we vanish. And it could be that the last moment before we vanish, which can be on your deathbed, is that you have a deep sigh of satisfaction because all of that quest for enhancement was let go of. Hypohumanism, therefore, welcomes the things that go wrong. They celebrate weakness. They don't encourage weakness whatsoever, but they see weakness as part of the human story, the human condition. Certainly the danger of AI that says I'll prevent mistakes in children doesn't allow the children to learn from mistakes. And we've already got evidence for a sort of decline in cognitive ability in that case. So just put those three things alongside each other, of transhumanism, of hyperhumanism, and perhaps the slightly more frowny, not as clear concept of hypohumanism, and I think we get three potentially competing philosophies. But I don't think it has to be competing at all. I think it's all right, particularly if we have, and there's a lot written about it, ethical and moral frameworks that perhaps celebrate the human condition, that allows us to acknowledge that human beings are of flesh and blood, and there might be certain times, particularly for example when people get ill and have diseases which cause great pain, where a human being benefits from AI and robotics to help them, and it can transcend a disability and allow somebody to walk upright again. It could also be that you need to solve a very, very difficult problem in the factory that you work in, and enhancing our cognitive ability temporarily. That's what we've done with calculators. In the right context, where right means it doesn't diminish our cognitive health over time, means that we have the tools that we've always created to help us do things. That's the more hyperhumanist approach as well. So if transhumanism sometimes out of compassion and sometimes out of an excitement that's conscious to improve who we are, combine that with hyperhumanism, which is where we augment as part of a creative process that feels benevolent, that accords with our values, and then allow for the fact that part of the human story sometimes is less is more, that going downhill enables us to go uphill, having learned something, by acknowledging our weakness and accepting there are certain times in our lives where decluttering, reducing, diminishing, and even disappearing can be a good thing. Perhaps we'll have a more complicated but more integrated philosophy, and maybe we'll be able to then locate AI, not in this feverish quest to transcend humans only, but where we've got more capacity and a repertoire of human ideas, ideals, philosophies that could create a much more purposeful and maybe safer, in a good way, and benevolent technology.